Morning, ladies. So today our learning target is I can make inferences about a historical text and identify relevant details to support them. So again, we're making these inferences. We're taking background knowledge. We're applying it to new content to make inferences, make these assumptions. Historical text, we're talking about nonfiction. So we're talking about something that happened that was true. If it's historical, we're going to learn about the gold rush today. And relevant details, these are details that make sense. So you have a couple questions that we will preview after we do our first read. And today we're really focusing on relevant details that support our responses. So historical text, the gold rush. John Sutter moved from Switzerland to California in 1839 when California was owned by Mexico. He received a large grant of 50,000 acres in Sacramento Valley and built Sutter Fort in the heart of present-day Sacramento. Sutter's Fort was a place for travelers to rest and to purchase needed supplies. In 1847, John Sutter hired James Marshall to build a sawmill about 50 miles from Sacramento in a small town called Coloma. Coloma was right next to the American River and was covered with plenty of trees for Sutter to use as lumber. On January 4th, 1848, while working at the sawmill, James Marshall found a shiny rock that looked like gold. He immediately took the rock to Sutter, who tested and confirmed that it was gold. Sutter was concerned that the discovery of gold would take away his workers and that the gold would bring too many prospectors onto his land. He asked Marshall not to tell anyone about the discovery for the time being. The secret did not stay a secret for long, however. Samuel Brannan, a store owner who found out about the gold, was stocked up on every shovel pan pan he could find, was soon walking up and down San Francisco holding a small bottle of gold and shouting the news through the streets. On December 5th, 1848, President James Polk spoke to Congress and acknowledged the discovery of gold in California. Before long, the rush was on, and 49ers, named after 1849 when they set out from all over the country and the world, flocked to California to seek their fortunes. When miners arrived in California, many of them didn't know what awaited them. They soon found out that a miner's life was not easy. Painting for gold was dirty, wet, cold, or hot job and was exhausting. Miners were constantly dirty and wore the same muddy clothes every day. They also didn't eat well. Sleeping was uncomfortable too. Some prospectors slept in tents. A few had cabins, and many used a tree as shelter for the night. If it was raining or snowing outside, the miners could not work and were forced to stay inside for days at a time. Out of all the miners who came to California, about a third of them died from exhaustion, overexposure to the weather, a poor diet, illness, or violence. Being a miner was a difficult life, but for many, the chance of possibly striking it rich made it worth it. So before we get into our close read, let's take a peek at our questions. So number 1, make an inference. Was John Sutter a wealthy man when he moved to California? Identify at least 2 points from the text to support your answer. So when he moved to California. Okay, so this is not after he discovers gold. This is when he moves to California. So just a little tip for number 1. Number 2, what reasons did Sutter decide to build his sawmill in the location that he chose? So why did he choose that location for the sawmill? And you got to do some inferring, and you have to use some context clues to figure out what that word sawmill is used for. Hint, look at that word lumber. Number 3, make an inference. Why did Samuel Brannan stock up on every shovel and pan he could find before shouting the news of a gold rush throughout the streets of San Francisco? Number 4, mining for gold was difficult. Find proof of the text to support this idea. So number 4, they give you your claim here. Mining for gold was difficult. There's no doubt about it. So now the proof is your evidence. Okay, so again, they're giving different words here for yesterday and today. We're giving clues, proof, backup. These are all your details to support your text, just with kind of some different words to identify them. Number 5, if mining for gold was such a hard job, why did so many decide to do this? Okay, so now it's time to close read. You're going to chunk your text, circle and attempt to define unknown words, underline key information, and you're remembering to focus on information that would help to support your answers because you've already previewed your questions. Summarize in the margin, identify any elements that may be helpful. So because this is a nonfiction text, you should be writing your main idea after your close read, Again, you're focusing on things such as difficult life for miners, um, reason and motivation for certain actions of characters. And then keep in mind for that number one, you're focusing on details from that first paragraph about Sutter when he first moves to California. How do you know he's wealthy? How do you know he has money? So now it is time to pause the video to do your close read and respond to your questions, and then you can kind of resume it and check your responses against mine. Alrighty, so now it's time to compare your summary notes against mine. So let's take a look here at the first chunk. So he moved from Switzerland to California. I think that is very important to kind of show where he came from. A land grant. A grant is a gift to use. So he was given 50,000 acres, which is a huge amount of property. And then he built this sawmill. Sawmill uses lumber. Miss Egan had some background information about that, but plenty of trees for Sutter to use lumber. This kind of confirmed my definition up here, that a sawmill is a place that turns that is used for logging, so it turns trees into lumber to be used for manufacturing. So even if you didn't know that, you could have used your context clue to figure out, oh, that's why he's doing that. And in this first pair, he found gold, big star, double underline right there. So John Sutter moves to Sacramento and built Sutter's Fort. He hires James Marshall to build a sawmill and finds gold. All right, so let's take a peek now at my second chunk here. So Sutter was concerned, Sutter was worried that the discovery would take away his workers and that the gold would bring too many prospectors to his land. So prospectors, these are the people who are kind of looking for that gold too, of the prospect of gold. Also talked about the Samuel Brennan. That was one of our questions, so I wanted to identify that. And so this was kind of a question that I kind of asked myself as I was reading my second chunk here. What does this say about Sutter in regards to his traits and qualities, that he wanted to kind of keep this for himself, kind of that greed really shining through here? So the gold secret is out. People rush to California in hopes of fortune. So also too, you have the president down here who acknowledges the discovery of gold, kind of confirms that for the entire country. So then 49ers, we even have a football team named after them now, rush to California to, in hopes of finding this major fortune. Um, Flocked means that they all kind of went there. So now that they're all there, they were like, wow, I didn't realize how labor intensive this job was. So we have kind of this high risks, high reward. But a miner's life was not easy. Okay, and then I kind of am underlining details that support that. Dirty, wet, cold, hot job, was exhausted, constantly dirty, same muddy clothes every day, didn't eat well, didn't sleep well, hard to find shelter, exhaustion, overexposure to weather, poor diet, illness, and violence. People lost their lives. So being a miner was difficult, but that possibility for striking rich made it worth it. So it was a hard, risky job of a gold miner, but many died, but many also became rich. I mean, a lot of people did discover gold and became very wealthy from it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to talk about possible structures here. So there was a bunch that could have been used. So let's kind of just walk through the first two that are here. So descriptive, give characteristics of the California Gold Rush and explains the motives, results, and the lives of miners. Cause and effect. Um, the cause was the discovery of gold in California, and that President James Polk acknowledges the discovery of the gold in California. So it wasn't just this hoax, it wasn't just this story that people were telling. The President of the United States kind of confirms it on the news. So people from all over the world flocked to California in search of fortune. People died because of the work condition for miners, but some people made a fortune from the gold. So down here too, chronological sequence. It's told in order from beginning, middle to end, and also kind of what happens afterwards, kind of that resulting part there. Preposition and support is another one that I think is supported here. Again, that's that main idea in detail. So main idea, 1847, gold was discovered in California, which I identified at the bottom of my paper, which led to the rush of people searching for fortune, and there were mixed results. The details, gold was discovered at John Sutter's sawmill in 1847. People flocked to California in 1849. but were unaware of the working conditions in the mine. Some died, some became rich. Those are my details to support. So now let's take a look at some of the questions. And I do want to talk about question number 1 because I want to see how we did here. So make an inference. Was John Sutter a wealthy man when he moved to California? So this is when he moved to California from Switzerland, not after he discovered gold. And take a look at my response here, and then you can kind of evaluate and compare and contrast yours. So John Sutter was a wealthy man when he moved to California because of his great grant and ability to build. Okay. He received a land grant of 50,000 acres in Sacramento. He built Sutter Fort, which was a place for travelers to rest and purchase needed supplies. So what I did here was I applied my background knowledge. So if someone is given this amount of land, especially at this time, was wealth. And then for him to be able to have the materials to like build a store and then build this whole different sawmill on a location a few 50 miles away, it shows his wealth. It shows that he has a lot to work with. So that one was kind of a difficult inference to make, and I'm hoping that you did. But if not, go back and revisit your answer and make those adjustments. So number 2, major inference as well. They don't really tell us this. We have to infer. For what reasons did Sutter decide to build his sawmill in the location he chose? So Sutter decided to build a sawmill in Coloma, so that was the location. So I added in that little detail because it was near trees. Okay, a sawmill is a place where they make lumber. So the text states, and again, you see how I did the dot, dot, dot in the quotes. It means I'm not using the entire part of the sentence, but what I am using, I'm copying verbatim, so I do need to have those appropriate quotes there. So covered with plenty of trees for Sutter to use as lumber. There it is. And then I paraphrase my next detail. The location of the river was also ideal for travel and transport of trees and lumber. Number 3 is an interesting question. So this was all about Samuel Brannan and him stocking up on everything in his store before shouting the news. So Samuel Brannan stocked up on every shovel and pan he could find before shouting the news so that he could have all the local gold mining supplies for himself. This was allow him to possibly obtain more gold at a quicker pace than others who needed to travel for supplies. Okay. Also, just thinking about this too, you can also go the route that he was greedy. He wanted it for himself. He wanted people to maybe buy supplies from him before they had gold so that he can kind of double dip there and get money for profits from the gold and then from the supplies that he was kind of hoarding for himself. So number 4, mining was difficult. Find proof in the text to support this. So what I did was I identified all of them. You only technically need to do 2 because I didn't ask for anything else. So kind of rule of thumb is 2. What I did here is I did little dots to kind of show where the quotes were. So I found kind of all of them. So make sure that you have at least 2 of these in your response for question number 4. Painting for gold was dirty, wet, cold, or a hot job and was exhausting. Miners were constantly dirty, wet, and wore the same muddy clothes each day. They also didn't eat well. Sleeping was uncomfortable too. They were forced to stay inside for days at a time due to weather, and a third of all miners died from exhaustion, poor diet, illness, etc. Number 5, if mining for gold was such a hard job, why did so many decide to do this? So I hope that you made this inference with the information that was provided to you. So I said, so many decided to mine for gold because there was a possibility of fortune. So this idea that they could possibly be very, very rich and just kind of finding it for themselves is very desirable and really made a lot of people go to California during this time. So I said the text states being a miner was a difficult life, but for many, the chance of possibly striking rich made it worth it. And after the discovery, many rushed to California in hopes of digging for fortune. All right, ladies, so compare and contrast your responses. Go back, make sure you have relevant details for everything. Double check, go back, take a look at your main idea, okay? You should have things like this at the bottom. You should have little questions that you're asking off to the side, and you should be applying the close read strategy. That's how you improve your comprehension. All right, ladies, I cannot wait to see your responses and hear from you during our Zoom. Thank you.